The USS Samuel B was supposed to be a tiny escort ship that spent the war protecting convoys and hunting submarines. But on October 25, 1944, this 306-foot destroyer escort did something that naval experts still call impossible. It charged straight at the most powerful battleship force Japan had ever assembled and somehow lived to tell about it. Well, some of them did. But here's what nobody could tell you until 2022, because in June of that year, explorers found the Sammy B, sitting at 22,621 feet underwater, making it the deepest shipwreck ever discovered. And what they saw down there tells a completely different story about how this David versus Goliath battle actually ended. See, the 120 survivors, who spent 50 hours floating in the Pacific, could only tell you what happened before their ship disappeared beneath the waves. They never saw what happened during that 4-mile journey to the ocean floor. They never saw how their ship hit bottom, or what condition it was in when it finally came to rest in the abyss. But the technology that found this ship is advancing so fast that what I'm about to show you might be the only time we ever get to see a World War II battle site this perfectly preserved. Because this wasn't just a sinking. This was a 78-year-old crime scene, frozen in time at a depth where no human had any business being able to investigate it. And there's something about how this ship ended up down there that nobody saw coming. Something that the wreck revealed about the final moments of the most lopsided naval engagement in history. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about what happens when a destroyer escort takes on heavy cruisers and refuses to back down. Because this ship did something in 1944 that broke every rule of naval warfare, and the evidence has been sitting at the bottom of the Philippine Sea for 78 years, waiting for someone to finally tell this story properly. The USS Samuel B was found at a depth that should have made discovery impossible. But the way they found it reveals something disturbing about how much of our ocean we've never seen. Think about this for a second. We've mapped more of the surface of Mars than we have the bottom of our own oceans. And when I say bottom, I'm talking about places like where the Sammy B ended up, almost 23,000 feet down, in a part of the Pacific Ocean that's basically an alien world. The water pressure down there is over 1,000 times what you feel at sea level. If you took a styrofoam cup down there, it would compress to the size of a thimble in seconds. But in June 2022, retired Navy officer Victor Vescovo and his team did something that sounds like science fiction. They climbed into a submersible called the Limiting Factor, basically a titanium sphere designed to protect humans at depths that would normally kill them instantly. And they went hunting for ghosts. The technology they used is so advanced that it didn't even exist 5 years ago. We're talking about sonar systems that can map the ocean floor with precision down to individual objects, cameras that can operate in complete darkness under pressure that would crush a car, and navigation systems that work where GPS signals can't reach. But before I tell you why this depth changes everything, you need to understand what makes this ship different from every other wreck they've ever found. See, most shipwrecks at these depths are crushed beyond recognition. The pressure down there doesn't just sink ships, it obliterates them. Metal gets compressed, structures collapse, and after decades on the ocean floor, you're usually left with nothing but a debris field that barely resembles what it used to be. But when Vescovo's team found the Sammy B, something was different. The ship was lying on a slope, broken into 2 main pieces separated by just about 15 feet. And here's the weird part. They could still see everything. The hull, the guns, the torpedo tubes, even the mast that had been knocked down by enemy fire during the battle. Now here's where it gets weird. The condition of this ship tells a story that nobody expected to find. The preservation was so good that they could actually see battle damage from 1944. shell impacts on the hull, structural damage from the fight, evidence of the exact hits that sent this ship to the bottom. It's like finding a crime scene that's been perfectly preserved for 78 years, except the crime scene is a naval battle and it's sitting at a depth where no human has any business being able to see it. This level of preservation means we can actually witness the final moments of a battle that happened before most of our grandparents were born. We can see exactly how a 1,350-ton destroyer escort stood up to Japanese heavy cruisers, weighing 10 times more. We can trace the damage that killed 89 American sailors and sent their ship on a 4-mile journey to the ocean floor. But what happened to put this ship down there in the first place is a story that most people don't know. And it's about to make you question everything you think you know about being outgunned. Because this ship did something in 1944 that military experts still call impossible. Something so crazy that when you hear the numbers, you're going to think I'm making it up. But the evidence is sitting right there on the ocean floor, and it's been waiting 78 years for someone to tell this story properly. On October 25, 1944, the USS Samuel B. Roberts faced the most powerful naval force Japan had ever assembled, and instead of running, they charged straight at it. Let me paint you a picture of just how insane this was. The Sammy B was part of something called Taffy 3, a small group of American ships assigned to protect the invasion of the Philippines. We're talking about 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. These weren't frontline warships. These were support vessels, designed to escort convoys and hunt submarines, not to engage in major naval battles. But on the morning of October 25th, they found themselves face to face with the Japanese center force, and this was basically Japan's last attempt to win the war at sea. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita was leading 23 ships, including the super battleship Yamato, 3 more battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers. But the numbers make this sound even more insane than it actually was. The Yamato alone displaced over 70,000 tons. That's more than the entire American task force combined. Its main guns fired shells weighing 3,200 pounds each, bigger than some of the American ships' entire torpedo loads. The Japanese force had been designed specifically to destroy American aircraft carriers and battleships, not to fight tiny escort vessels that had wandered into the wrong neighborhood. When the Japanese ships appeared on the horizon, Commander Robert Copeland of the Samuel B. Roberts faced a choice that no naval officer should ever have to make. He could order his ship to run, which would mean abandoning the escort carriers and probably losing the entire task force. Or he could order his 215-man crew to engage an enemy force that outgunned them by a ratio that military textbooks would call mathematically impossible to survive. Copeland got on the ship's intercom and told his crew exactly what they were up against. This will be a fight against overwhelming odds from which survival cannot be expected. We will do what damage we can. Now, what happened next breaks every rule of naval warfare that had ever been written. Instead of trying to escape, the Sammy B and the other small ships of Taffy 3 did something that confused the Japanese so much that it probably saved the entire American invasion force. They attacked. Not defensively, not reluctantly, but with the kind of aggressive tactics that you'd expect from heavy cruisers, not destroyer escorts. The Samuel B. Roberts charged straight at the Japanese heavy cruiser Chokai, C-H-O-H Kai, closing to within 2 nautical miles before launching torpedoes. 2 miles. In naval terms, that's like standing in your living room and shooting at someone in your neighbor's house. At that range, both sides were essentially firing point blank at each other. But here's where the story gets really crazy. The Sammy B then turned its attention to another heavy cruiser, the Chikuma, and engaged in what can only be described as a gun duel. A 1,350-ton destroyer escort armed with two 5-inch guns, was trading shots with an 11,200-ton heavy cruiser armed with 10 8-inch guns. For 35 minutes, the Samuel B. Roberts fired over 600 rounds of 5-inch ammunition at the Japanese ships. They were so close that the crew could see the enemy sailors on deck. They scored multiple hits on the Chikuma, causing fires and damage that would eventually contribute to that ship's sinking later in the battle. The Japanese, despite having overwhelming firepower advantage, couldn't seem to land decisive hits on the small American ships. Part of this was due to the smoke screens the Americans were laying down. But part of it was something else entirely. The Japanese had trained to fight other heavy ships at long range. They weren't prepared for tiny, fast-moving targets that closed to knife-fighting distance and then refused to die. But there's something about how this ship fought that day that explains why it's sitting at the bottom of the ocean in two pieces. And it's not what you think. See, what most people don't understand about this battle is that the Americans weren't just brave, they were desperate. And desperation makes you do things that you would never normally consider. Things that break your own equipment, things that put your crew in even more danger than they already were. Because what the crew of the Samuel B. Roberts did in those final moments would have been physically impossible if they hadn't broken their own ship first. The reason the Sammy B could engage superior forces wasn't just courage. They literally broke their ship's safety systems to achieve impossible speed and firepower. Let me explain what normally happens when you push a World War II destroyer escort beyond its design limits. These ships were built for efficiency, not for emergency performance. They had safety systems designed to prevent the engines from overheating, the boilers from overpressurizing, and the guns from firing faster than the cooling systems could handle. But Chief Engineer Lieutenant Lucky Trowbridge threw all of that out the window. When Commander Copeland ordered flank speed, Trowbridge didn't just push the engines to their maximum rated power. He bypassed every safety cutout in the system. He was running the ship's power plant so far beyond its design specifications that under normal circumstances, he would have been court-martialed for destroying government property. The result? The Samuel B. Roberts, which was designed to make 24 knots, was suddenly capable of over 28 knots. That doesn't sound like much, but in naval terms, that extra speed was the difference between being able to close with the enemy and being blown out of the water before you could fire a shot. But the specific way they did this is what ultimately sent them to the bottom. See, when you bypass safety systems on a 1944 destroyer escort, you're not just risking mechanical failure, you're guaranteeing it. Trowbridge knew that every minute he ran the engines at that level was reducing the ship's lifespan by hours or days. But he also knew that if they didn't get close enough to the Japanese ships to launch torpedoes, the entire task force was going to be destroyed anyway. Meanwhile, up on deck, Gunner's Mate 3rd Class Paul Carr was doing something equally insane with the ship's aft 5-inch gun. Naval guns in World War II had firing rate limits for a reason. Fire them too fast, and the barrel overheats. Fire them too fast for too long, and the breech mechanism can fail catastrophically. Carr fired all 325 rounds of his gun's ammunition in less than 35 minutes. That's almost 10 rounds per minute from a gun that was supposed to fire maybe half that rate. He kept firing even after the ship lost power to the gun's automatic loading system, manually loading 54-pound shells while under enemy fire. Here's the part that changes everything about this story. At 8:51 a.m., a Japanese shell hit the Samuel B. Roberts forward engine room, damaging one boiler and reducing the ship's speed to 17 knots. 9 minutes later, another hit from the battleship Congo knocked out the remaining engine completely, leaving the ship dead in the water. But here's what the survivors couldn't tell you, because they were too busy fighting for their lives to pay attention to the technical details. The engineering modifications that Trowbridge had made, the ones that gave them the speed to close with the enemy, also made the damage worse when it finally came. When you bypass safety systems and then take battle damage, the failures cascade. One hit that might have damaged a single system instead took out multiple systems because they were all running beyond their design limits. The ship didn't just lose power, it lost everything at once. By exceeding safety limits, they turned a 306-foot escort ship into something that could trade punches with cruisers. But this same engineering desperation is what caused the catastrophic damage that sent 89 men to their deaths and the ship to record depth. And Paul Carr. He kept firing his gun manually until a breech explosion killed him instantly. He was found by the rescue crews still trying to load another shell, even though half his body had been destroyed by the explosion. The Navy awarded him the Silver Star posthumously. But what they didn't know at the time was that his dedication to his gun had probably saved lives on other ships by keeping the Japanese cruisers under fire for those crucial extra minutes. The ship finally sank at 9 a.m., just 80 minutes after the battle began. But 120 crew members survived the sinking and spent the next 50 hours floating in the Pacific Ocean, waiting for rescue. Some died from wounds, some from exposure, and some from shark attacks. The lucky ones were picked up by American patrol craft on October 27th. And that brings us to the disturbing part about what they found when they got down there. Because the wreck revealed something about the ship's final moments that nobody alive could have known. Something that changes how we understand not just this battle, but how ships actually sink when they're damaged this badly. The 2022 discovery shows the Sammy B hit the seafloor bow first, after a 4-mile fall, preserving evidence of battle damage that tells us exactly how this David versus Goliath story really ended. When Victor Vescovo's submersible reached the wreck site, what they found challenged everything historians thought they knew about the ship's final moments. Remember, the only accounts we had were from survivors who were fighting for their lives, trying to abandon ship, or floating in life rafts, watching their ship disappear beneath the waves. But the ocean floor told a different story. The ship hit bottom bow first, which means it sank in a controlled manner, rather than rolling over or breaking apart during the descent. This suggests that even after taking fatal damage, the Sammy B maintained enough structural integrity to sink like a ship rather than like a pile of debris. The wreck lies broken into 2 main sections, but they're only separated by about 15 feet. In shipwreck terms, that's practically touching. Compare that to the Titanic, where the bow and stern sections are about 2,000 feet apart, and you start to understand what this preservation means. But what they can see on the wreck changes the story you've been told about this battle. The sonar images show the fallen mast, knocked down by Japanese shell fire during the engagement. They can see the gun mounts, the torpedo tubes, even individual pieces of equipment scattered around the debris field. But more importantly, they can see the battle damage. There are shell impacts on the hull that correspond exactly to the hits described by survivors. Structural damage that matches the timeline of the battle. Evidence of the flooding that eventually sent the ship down. It's like having a forensic examination of a 78-year-old crime scene, except the crime scene is spread across several acres of ocean floor at a depth where no human has any business being able to investigate. The level of detail they captured is extraordinary. They can see where the Japanese shells punched through the ship's armor. They can trace the path of flooding through compartments that were breached during the battle. They can even see evidence of the engineering modifications that Trowbridge made. the ones that gave the ship its impossible speed, but also contributed to the catastrophic failures when battle damage occurred. This is where the technology that found this ship becomes as important as the ship itself. The limiting factor submersible that found the Samuel B represents a quantum leap in deep-sea exploration capability. We're talking about a vehicle that can take humans to the deepest parts of any ocean on Earth, equipped with cameras and sonar systems that can capture details no one has ever seen before. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. This technology is advancing so fast that missions like this might become routine within the next decade. Right now, there are maybe 3 or 4 vehicles in the world that can reach these depths. In 10 years, there might be hundreds. That means we're living through a unique moment in history where we can finally answer questions that have been unanswered for decades, maybe centuries. How many other ships from World War II are sitting at depths we couldn't reach until now? How many stories are waiting to be told? How many families have been wondering for 80 years what really happened to their fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers? The fact that we can now explore depths once thought impossible means stories like the Samuel B's, buried under 4 miles of water for 78 years, can finally be told accurately. But it also means there are probably hundreds of similar stories still down there waiting. The USS Samuel B. Roberts is now officially protected under the Sunken Military Craft Act, which means it's considered a war grave. No one can disturb the site without permits from the U.S. Navy. The 89 men who died with their ship are still down there, and they're finally resting in a place where their story can be told properly. But what happened to the 120 survivors is a story that connects 1944 to 2022 in a way that makes this discovery even more remarkable. Because the last living survivor of the Samuel B. Roberts, a man named Adred Lenoir, died on March 20th, 2022, just 3 months before the wreck was found. For 78 years, men like Lenoir carried the memory of what happened that day. They told the story to their families, to historians, to anyone who would listen. They kept the memory of their shipmates alive through decades when the ship itself was lost to the depths. And now, just months after the last witness passed away, technology has given us the ability to see what they saw in those final moments, to understand what really happened when their ship disappeared beneath the waves, to honor not just their courage, but their sacrifice in a way that wasn't possible while they were alive to see it. The Samuel B. Roberts earned 1 battle star for its service in World War II. But what it really earned was something more valuable, a place in history as the ship that proved courage isn't about the size of your guns or the thickness of your armor. It's about what you do when everything is on the line and the odds are impossible. And that's a lesson that's been sitting at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean for 78 years, waiting for someone with the right technology and the right curiosity to bring it back to the surface.